It was 3 a.m. when I heard that faint, desperate knock on my front door. At first, I thought it was the wind, rattling against the porch as it always did in October. But then came a voice weak, trembling, calling my name. When I opened the door, my daughter Emily collapsed into my arms. Her skin was cold, her breath shallow, her face covered in bruises that didn't belong on someone so young. For a moment, I couldn't move. The only sound in that dark hour was the old clock ticking behind me, counting the seconds of my disbelief. I used to think the worst pain a mother could feel was losing a child, but I was wrong. The worst pain is watching your child come back to you broken because of the person she trusted most. I'm Margaret, and this is the night my world turned upside down. Please stay until the end of my story because what I learned afterward changed everything I thought I knew about love, betrayal, and motherhood. After that knock, nothing in my life was ever the same again. I thought it would be just another quiet night, another round of sleepless hours with my old clock ticking on the wall. But when I opened that door and saw my daughter collapse into my arms, something inside me broke and something else awakened. That moment split my life in two, before the knock and after it. What came next was a storm I never expected to face again, not at my age, not in my own home. When I lifted Emily from the porch that night, her body felt limp, heavier than I remembered. The cold air bit into my skin as I tried to hold her steady. Her head rested on my shoulder, and for a split second I caught the faint scent of her shampoo, the same lavender one I used to buy for her when she was a teenager. I called 911, my voice shaking so hard that the dispatcher had to ask me to repeat my address twice. "Please hurry," I whispered. "My daughter's hurt." I laid her on the old couch in the living room, the one with worn cushions that had seen too many lonely nights. Under the dim light of the table lamp, I saw the dark marks on her neck, uneven, fresh, shaped like fingers. My heart stopped. I touched her cheek gently. She flinched. Her lip was split. Her hands were scraped. My little girl, who once laughed through the halls of this house, now lay silent and bruised in the same room where I had read her bedtime stories. The paramedics arrived 10 minutes later, 10 of the longest minutes of my life. I followed them as they carried her out on a stretcher, my bare feet slapping the cold wooden floor. "We'll take good care of her, ma'am," one of them said, but I couldn't answer. My throat burned, and I realized I had been holding my breath since the moment she knocked on that door. The drive to the hospital was quiet, except for the faint hum of the ambulance and the distant sound of my own heart breaking. I stared at Emily's face, pale under the fluorescent lights, and I couldn't stop thinking about Michael, her husband, the man I had welcomed into my home as a son. I had defended him when neighbors whispered he was too controlling, too proud. "He's just protective," I used to say. How foolish those words sounded now. When we arrived, the emergency room smelled of antiseptic and sleeplessness. The nurse asked me to wait outside while they examined her. I sat in that plastic chair by the vending machine, hands trembling in my lap. A memory came rushing back. Emily at 6 years old, running to me after scraping her knee on the sidewalk. "Don't cry, Mama," she had said back then. "It doesn't hurt that bad." Now, decades later, I was the one trying not to cry, though everything inside me hurt. Dr. Alana Brooks came out after what felt like an eternity. Her eyes were kind but tired, the way doctors' eyes often are after too many long nights. "Your daughter is stable," she said softly. "She has some bruising on her neck and arms. There's no sign of internal injury, but she's emotionally shaken. We'll keep her under observation tonight." I nodded, but I couldn't form words. When I finally saw Emily again, she was half asleep, an IV running into her arm. I took her hand, whispering her name. Her eyes fluttered open for a second. "Mom," she murmured. "He lied to me. He said he loved me." Then she drifted back into silence. I sat there for hours, holding her hand, listening to the steady beep of the heart monitor. The longer I looked at her, the more I felt something growing inside me, not just pain, but fury. I had raised Emily to be gentle, kind, and patient. I had taught her that love meant forgiveness, that marriage required understanding. But what happens when that understanding becomes submission? When love turns into a weapon? I had once believed my daughter had found happiness. Now I could see that happiness had turned into a prison. The morning light crept through the blinds. I hadn't slept. I looked at her sleeping face and made a silent promise. I would not let this be buried under excuses or shame. Whatever Michael had done, the truth would come out. I had spent my life following the rules, trusting the system, believing people could change. But now, I would follow only one rule: protect my daughter at all costs. When the nurse came to check on Emily, she asked if I needed anything. I looked down at my trembling hands and whispered, "Yes, I need justice." I walked out of the hospital to get some air. The sun was rising, painting the sky pink and gold, but I couldn't feel its warmth. I sat on the bench outside, watching people come and go, families holding coffee cups, fathers carrying sleeping children. I envied them. They still believed in peace. They hadn't yet seen what betrayal could do to a family. I know many of you watching might understand that feeling, the ache of giving everything, only to be repaid with silence, disrespect, or worse. Maybe your children have turned their backs on you after all you've done for them. Maybe you've been told you're too old to matter. I want you to know you're not alone. If you've ever felt invisible, please stay with me till the end of this story. What happened next taught me that even in our darkest moments, we still have power left inside us. And if you're hearing my voice right now and it touches something in your heart, take a second to like this video and subscribe. Not for me, but for all the mothers, fathers, and grandparents who have ever been forgotten, who still believe that love can heal, but justice must be earned. That night in the hospital, I realized something else too. It wasn't just Emily who had been betrayed. It was me. I had trusted Michael. I had welcomed him into our family, shared dinners, birthdays, Christmas mornings. I had even given him my late husband's watch when he got the promotion last year. I thought he would protect Emily when I was gone. But as I sat there, the ticking of that same clock echoed in my mind each second, reminding me of my mistake. When Emily finally woke up fully, she turned her head toward me and whispered, "Mom, please don't tell anyone. He said he'd change." Her voice was fragile, full of fear. I squeezed her hand gently. "Sweetheart," I said, "love should never hurt. And if it does, it's not love anymore." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment we were just two women, mother and daughter, bound by pain, but also by an unspoken strength that neither time nor betrayal could destroy. That was the beginning of our fight. Neither of us knew how long it would take or what it would cost. But one thing was certain: I would no longer stand by and let silence win. The sun had already risen when I finally left Emily's hospital room. My legs felt weak, my mind heavy. The smell of antiseptic still clung to my clothes. As I walked toward the parking lot, I passed a young couple laughing together near the vending machine, holding hands, whispering promises. For a moment, I couldn't move. That sight pierced me like a memory I didn't ask to remember. Love, promises, wedding rings, laughter. How could something that begins so bright turn so dark? 3 years earlier, on a warm Saturday in June, the world had looked different. The air smelled of roses and wedding cake. My backyard was full of people, neighbors, cousins, friends, everyone smiling under strings of white lights I had hung myself. Emily, my only daughter, stood in the center of it all, radiant in her lace gown. Her laughter filled the garden like music. I remember thinking that no mother could ever ask for more. Michael was standing beside her, handsome in his navy suit, that charming smile he used so well. When he took Emily's hands and looked into her eyes, I saw the kind of tenderness I thought every mother dreamed of seeing in her daughter's husband. "I'll protect her forever," he said during his vows, his voice steady and warm. I believed him, every single word. I had lost my husband 10 years before that day. For years, I'd lived quietly, watching Emily grow into a woman stronger and kinder than I'd ever been. When Michael entered her life, I saw a spark in her eyes that had been missing since her father's death. He was polite, thoughtful, and never forgot to bring me flowers on Mother's Day. I told my friends, "He's a good man. Emily's lucky." Our neighborhood in Ashton Hill was the kind of place where people still waved from their porches, where you knew the sound of every car that drove by. On summer evenings, children chased each other in the cul-de-sac while the adults sat with lemonade, talking about weather and grandchildren. Michael fit right in. He helped old Mr. Peterson fix his fence, shoveled snow for the widow across the street. Everyone said, "Emily married well." The first Christmas after their wedding, I hosted dinner at my house. Emily brought a homemade pie, and Michael carried a brand new TV to surprise me. "You shouldn't have," I said, and he smiled. "You've done enough for us already, Mom." He called me Mom. I still remember how warm that felt. That night, as we all sat by the fireplace, Emily leaned her head on his shoulder. Michael told stories about work, about how he wanted to start his own business one day. I looked at them and thought, my husband would be proud. Everything felt right, like the years of loneliness had been worth it just to see her happy. But life, I've learned, can turn slowly, so slowly that you don't notice when love starts dying. It began with small things. Missed dinners. Late nights. Phone calls. Emily would hang up quickly when I walked into the room. "He's just tired, Mom," she'd say. "Work's been stressful." I didn't press her. I didn't want to be that kind of mother who meddles. I trusted her. I trusted him. One Sunday morning, about a year after the wedding, I stopped by their house unannounced with muffins. Emily answered the door, her smile forced, her eyes red. Behind her, Michael's voice came from the kitchen, sharp, angry. When he appeared, his tone changed instantly. "Margaret, what a surprise." He kissed my cheek as if nothing had happened. I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe they'd just had a bad morning. All couples argue, don't they? But as months went by, the warmth faded. Emily visited less often. When she did, she seemed distracted, her laughter brittle. I'd ask if she was okay, and she'd always say, "Of course, Mom, you worry too much." I wanted to believe her, I really did. Then came the night of the neighborhood barbecue, 2 summers ago. I saw Michael standing too close to a young woman I didn't recognize. Long red hair, a laugh that cut through the noise. Emily stood a few feet away, pretending not to notice. Later that evening, I asked her quietly, "Who was that?" She smiled without looking at me. "Just a friend from his office." But the way she said it made my stomach twist. That was the first time I felt fear, not for her safety yet, but for her heart. I knew that tone. I had used it myself years ago, when my own marriage had started to crack before it fell apart completely. Still, I stayed silent. Parents of grown children learn that silence is often the only bridge left. You keep your thoughts to yourself, hoping things will work out. But silence, I've learned, is how suffering grows roots. The breaking point came last winter. Emily called late one night, her voice trembling. "Mom, can I come stay with you for a few days?" Michael and I had a fight. When she arrived, her eyes were swollen from crying, but she insisted nothing was wrong. I made her tea, tucked her into the guest room, and told her she could stay as long as she needed. By morning, she had already left. She left a note on the counter. "Don't worry, Mom. We're fine, love, Emily." I kept that note in my kitchen drawer for months. I'd open it sometimes just to remind myself that love could survive storms. I didn't know then that it was already too late. Now, sitting in the hospital beside her bruised body, those memories burned like fire. Every smile, every holiday, every word of his vows lies. Every flower he gave, every laugh he shared poison. I looked at her pale hand resting in mine and whispered, "You deserved better, sweetheart." In that moment, I realized how easily we mistake control for care, possession for love. Michael's charm had fooled everyone, even me. And now my daughter was paying the price for all the red flags I had ignored. If you're a parent watching this, maybe you understand that kind of guilt. The guilt that keeps you awake at night, replaying every decision, every warning sign you missed. We give our children the best of us, hoping it will protect them, but sometimes all it does is make their pain hit closer to home. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I knew I couldn't change the past, but I could decide what to do next. Emily's life wouldn't end in fear. Not if I could help it. What I didn't know was that my decision to fight back would uncover secrets darker than betrayal itself, secrets buried in our small town, in people I thought I could trust. And as I stepped out of that hospital room, into the bright morning light, I made myself a promise. The truth would come out, no matter what it cost me. That morning, when I returned home from the hospital, the house felt colder than usual. The sun was already high, but it could not chase away the chill that had settled into my bones. I sat at the kitchen table where Emily used to sip coffee before work, her laughter echoing faintly in my mind. Every corner of that house carried her scent, her voice, her memories, and now her pain. The ticking clock on the wall sounded louder than ever, each beat reminding me that I had failed to see what was right in front of me. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Instead, there was only stillness, until I heard the soft knock on my back door. It was Mrs. Franklin, my next-door neighbor. 70 years old, sharp as a blade, and kind in ways that only time could teach. She was holding a plate covered with foil. "I made blueberry muffins," she said, stepping in without waiting for an invitation. "You look like you haven't eaten." I tried to smile, but my lips barely moved. "You didn't have to, Ruth." She set the plate down on the table, brushing crumbs off her apron. "You know me," she said. "I worry. I saw the ambulance last night. Is Emily all right?" The question hit me like a slap. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I simply nodded. "She's stable," I said quietly. "But she's not all right. Not really." Mrs. Franklin pulled out a chair and sat down across from me. "I figured as much. I don't mean to pry, dear, but I've seen things." Her tone softened, as if she were stepping onto thin ice. "Michael hasn't been himself lately." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, eyes flicking to the window as though afraid someone might be listening. "I wasn't going to say anything, but you deserve to know. I've seen him, Margaret, more than once, with another woman." The words hung in the air between us. For a moment, the kitchen was so quiet that I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator. "Are you sure?" I asked, though deep down, I already knew the answer. "Yes," she said firmly. "A young woman, red hair, maybe 30. I saw them together at the diner near Main Street laughing, holding hands like teenagers. Then again at the farmer's market last Saturday. He wasn't even trying to hide it." I gripped the edge of the table. Red hair. The woman from the barbecue. I could see her face as clear as day. "Did Emily know?" Mrs. Franklin sighed. "Maybe, but you know how girls are, honey. They hope it'll pass. They want to believe it's just a mistake." Her words cut through me. I stared at the muffins on the plate, untouched, their sweet smell almost unbearable. "He didn't just hurt her, Ruth," I said slowly. "He broke something in her that I don't know how to fix." Mrs. Franklin reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Then you do what mothers do. You help her find her strength again." For a long while we sat in silence. Outside, the wind rustled the maple trees that lined our yards. Somewhere a dog barked. Life went on, as if nothing had happened. When she finally stood to leave, Mrs. Franklin said something that stayed with me. "Margaret, you've always been the strong one around here. Don't let this destroy you too." After she left, I walked to the window. From there, I could see her small garden full of daisies and roses, blooming despite the season's chill. That's the thing about women like her, and maybe like me too, we keep blooming, even when the frost comes early. Later that afternoon, as I was cleaning up the kitchen, I found one of Emily's old photographs tucked behind the sugar jar. It was from her college graduation. Her smile was pure sunlight. She stood between me and Michael, holding her diploma like it was a crown. I remembered how proud I'd been that day, and how Michael had kissed her forehead in front of everyone. I'd thought then, she's safe now. How wrong I was. The phone rang, startling me. It was Thomas, my late husband's old friend who still lived a few blocks away. "Margaret," he said, "I heard something you might want to know." My heart skipped. "What is it?" He lowered his voice. "Michael's been hanging around the bar near the highway, with that red-haired woman. Folks are talking." I thanked him, trying to keep my voice steady. After we hung up, I sat down again, staring at the photo in my hands. There it was, the truth I had avoided for too long. You know, sometimes we mothers close our eyes because seeing the truth means admitting we were wrong. I thought love could change people. I thought kindness could fix cruelty. But love can't heal someone who enjoys hurting. As I sat there in the quiet, the front door creaked open. It was Liam, my 6-year-old grandson, holding a drawing in his small hands. "Grandma, I made this for Mommy," he said proudly. It was a picture of him, Emily, and me standing under a big sundae. There was no Michael in it. I took the drawing, smiling through the ache in my chest. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," I whispered. "Mommy will love it." He looked at me curiously. "Grandma, is Mommy sad?" I froze for a moment, then said softly, "She's just tired, honey, but she's strong." He nodded as if that explained everything, then ran to the backyard to play. I stood at the window watching him chase butterflies through the grass, thinking about how children see the world so simply. Maybe too simply. I know some of you watching have seen this kind of pain before, watching your family fall apart while you can't do anything to stop it. Tell me honestly, have you ever stayed silent just to keep peace in the family? Just type yes or no in the comments. I want to know if I'm not the only one who's done that. That evening, the sun dipped low behind the trees, spilling gold light across the living room. I took a deep breath, turned on the lamp, and opened my old notebook, the one I hadn't used since my husband passed. I began writing everything Mrs. Franklin had said, every detail Thomas had shared, every memory that felt suspicious. My hand shook, but my words were steady. When I closed the notebook, the room was almost dark. I looked up at the family photos on the wall: Emily's wedding, Liam's first birthday, Christmas mornings full of smiles. How easily pictures lie. The silence in that house was thick, but inside it, something had changed. I wasn't just a grieving mother anymore. I was a woman preparing for truth. And truth, I've learned, doesn't knock politely like Mrs. Franklin. It bursts through the door when you least expect it. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing the sound of the ambulance siren in my head, echoing over and over. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emily's face, pale, bruised, terrified. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy, like it's pressing down on your chest. Around midnight, I made myself a cup of tea, but it went cold in my hands. The clock struck 1, then 2. I gave up pretending to rest and grabbed my car keys. I needed to see her again, to know she was still breathing, still fighting. When I walked back into the hospital, the hallways were nearly empty. The night nurse at the front desk gave me a sympathetic look. "Room 214, she said softly. "She's been resting." The elevator hummed slowly as it carried me up. I could hear the faint beeping of monitors even before I reached her door. When I stepped inside, the room was dim, just the soft glow of the machines and the moonlight spilling through the blinds. Emily was lying there, motionless, her face turned slightly toward the window. I pulled a chair beside her bed and sat down. For a long moment, I just watched her breathe. Every rise and fall of her chest felt like a small miracle. Her hands were cold, so I took one in mine, rubbing gently as if my warmth could pull her back from wherever her mind had gone. Her eyelids fluttered, and she whispered, "Mom?" "I'm here, sweetheart," I said, leaning closer. She opened her eyes, dazed, her voice barely a whisper. "Did you tell anyone?" I hesitated. "No, baby. It's just you and me." A tear rolled down her cheek. "He said he'd change. He said it was my fault he got angry." My heart broke all over again. "Don't you ever believe that," I told her firmly. "None of this is your fault." But she just stared at the ceiling, silent. That silence hurt more than anything she could have said. When Dr. Brooks came in a few minutes later, I stood up quickly. She was young, maybe in her 30s, with gentle eyes that had already seen too much pain. "Mrs. Thompson," she said softly, "your daughter has some bruising and mild concussion. She's going to be okay physically, but emotionally—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "She's struggling. We suspect severe psychological distress, possibly depression." I nodded, even though my throat was too tight to speak. "She'll need rest, support, and time," Dr. Brooks continued. "We can keep her here a few days for monitoring." When she left, the room felt smaller somehow. I turned back to Emily, who had closed her eyes again. The sound of the heart monitor filled the silence between us. I wanted to scream. I wanted to go find Michael and demand why. But instead, I sat there, stroking my daughter's hair like I used to when she had fevers as a child. Back then, I could always make her better with soup, medicine, a mother's touch. But this time, none of that would work. This kind of wound was deeper, invisible. I thought of the day Emily was born, the way her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, the first cry that filled the hospital room. Back then, I had whispered a promise to her: "You will never face the world alone." And yet here she was, bruised by the hands of the man she trusted most. Around 3 in the morning, a nurse came in to check her vitals. I stepped out into the hallway. The air smelled of disinfectant and loneliness. Down the corridor, I could see other mothers sitting outside rooms, their faces etched with the same helpless fear. It struck me then, no matter how old our children get, we never stop worrying. We never stop being mothers. The waiting area was empty except for an old man asleep on a bench. I sat across from him and closed my eyes. The hum of the machines, the distant footsteps of nurses, it all blurred together into one long, endless night. When dawn finally broke, soft pink light spilling across the tiles, I returned to Emily's room. She was still asleep. A fresh vase of flowers sat on the bedside table. I frowned. Where had those come from? I picked up the card tucked inside. Thinking of you, M. My stomach turned. Michael. I tore the card in half and threw it in the trash. That man didn't deserve to be anywhere near her, not even in words. The door opened quietly, and Dr. Brooks entered again, holding a clipboard. How's she doing? She hasn't said much, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. That's normal, she said gently. Sometimes silence is part of healing, but she'll need counseling. You might want to look into a support group both for her and for yourself. I managed a nod. Thank you, doctor. After she left, I sat back down and took Emily's hand again. Her skin felt warmer now. I could almost believe she was dreaming of better days. I whispered, "You'll be safe, my love. I promise." I didn't know then how much that promise would cost me. As the morning light grew stronger, I saw the small marks on her wrists, shadows of where someone had gripped too hard. My chest tightened with rage. I had been a calm woman most of my life, slow to anger, quick to forgive. But at that moment, something in me shifted. Forgiveness would come later after justice. When the nurse brought breakfast, I barely touched it. My thoughts were already turning. How long had this been going on? Who else knew? Could anyone have stopped it sooner? I remembered Mrs. Franklin's words from the day before. I've seen him with another woman. And Thomas's warning. Folks are talking. It was all starting to fit together, piece by painful piece. Emily stirred again. Mom? She murmured. Yes, sweetheart? Don't be mad at him, she said faintly. He just loses control sometimes. I felt my throat tighten. I leaned close, whispering, That's not love, Emily. That's fear. And fear has no place in a marriage. She looked away, tears sliding down her temple. He said he'd change. I brushed her hair from her face. So did your father once, I said quietly, surprising even myself. For a moment her eyes widened. She had never heard me talk about the darker parts of my marriage before. Maybe now she would understand the things I had tried to protect her from. The days stretched on slowly. Visitors came and went. Nurses moved quietly in and out, and still I sat there, unwilling to leave her side. Every now and then, I'd catch a glimpse of the parking lot through the blinds, cars coming, cars going, but I couldn't make myself step outside. That afternoon, Dr. Brooks returned to check on Emily one last time before her shift ended. She's improving physically, she said. But she's avoiding reality. She blames herself. That's common with victims of abuse. They think if they'd been better, it wouldn't have happened. I nodded grimly. Then we'll remind her she's not to blame. Dr. Brooks gave me a tired smile. She's lucky to have you, Mrs. Thompson. Not everyone has someone who stays. When she left, I sat quietly for a long time, her words echoing in my head. Not everyone has someone who stays. I reached for Emily's hand again. I'm here, I whispered. I always will be. Outside, the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the window. The day had been long, but I knew it was only the beginning. That night, after spending the whole day at the hospital, I drove home in silence. The streets of Ashton Hill were empty, the streetlights throwing long yellow lines across the road. It felt strange to be heading back to that quiet house while Emily lay in a hospital bed, broken in ways I still couldn't fix. When I pulled into the driveway, I sat in the car for a while, my hands gripping the steering wheel. The air smelled like rain. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. I closed my eyes, and for a moment, I wished I could go back before the knock on my door, before the lies, before all this pain. But I couldn't. And as I turned off the engine, I heard a small voice from the window above calling softly, "Grandma?" I looked up, and there he was, Liam, my 6-year-old grandson, standing in his pajamas, clutching his stuffed bear, his small silhouette framed by the warm glow of the nightlight. I hadn't realized it was already so late, but children don't sleep well when the world around them is falling apart. I forced a smile and waved. "Go back to bed, sweetheart. Grandma's home." When I walked inside, he was already waiting at the bottom of the stairs, his little feet tapping nervously against the wood. "Grandma," he said softly, "is Mommy still sick?" His voice was so small, so full of hope, that it cracked something inside me. I knelt down and brushed his messy hair from his forehead. "Mommy's resting at the hospital," I told him gently. "She's going to be okay." He nodded, but his eyes searched mine like he was trying to see if I believed my own words. Children, they can always tell when adults are lying. I led him to the kitchen, warmed a cup of milk, and watched him sip it carefully, his small hands gripping the mug. "Did Daddy go see Mommy?" he asked. I froze. The question lingered in the air like a cold wind. "No, sweetheart," I said slowly. "Mommy needs quiet right now." He looked down at his milk, tracing a finger around the rim of the cup. "Daddy makes her cry," he whispered. I nearly dropped the spoon I was holding. "What did you say?" He looked up, blinking innocently. "Sometimes, when he yells, she hides in my room. We play with my cars so she doesn't have to hear." The image hit me so hard I had to sit down. My heart twisted, and all I could think about was how long this little boy had been carrying those memories. "You're very brave, Liam," I said softly. "You take good care of Mommy, don't you?" He nodded proudly. "That's what Grandpa would want." At that, tears burned in my eyes. My late husband had passed when Emily was only 15. I had told her then, "He's watching over us." And now, years later, our grandson believed it too. I tucked him into bed afterward, pulling the blanket up to his chin. "Will Mommy come home soon?" he asked, his voice muffled under the covers. "Soon," I said, kissing his forehead. "And when she does, things will be better. I promise." He smiled sleepily. "Okay, Grandma." I drew something for her. He pointed to a piece of paper taped on the wall, a crayon drawing of the three of us standing under a bright yellow Sunday No Michael. Just us. I stared at it for a long moment after he fell asleep. Maybe children know how to tell the truth without words. Maybe their drawings say the things adults are too afraid to admit. When I left his room, I stood in the hallway, listening to the faint rhythm of his breathing. That small sound grounded me. It reminded me that despite everything falling apart, there was still something worth protecting. I went to my bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. The silence pressed in again, heavy and endless. I picked up a framed photo from the nightstand, Emily holding newborn Liam, both of them wrapped in hospital blankets. I remembered that day so vividly. The nurse had placed the baby in Emily's arms, and she had looked up at me with tears in her eyes, saying, "Mom, I didn't know love could feel this big." And now that same love had become her prison. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. The cracks in the plaster formed strange shapes, like constellations I didn't recognize. Outside, the rain began to fall softly, tapping against the windows like quiet footsteps. When morning came, Liam woke me up before the sundae. "Grandma," he whispered, "can we make pancakes for Mommy when she comes home?" I smiled through the fog of exhaustion. "Of course, sweetheart, she'll love that." We mixed the batter together in the kitchen, the smell of vanilla and butter filling the air. For the first time in days, the house didn't feel like a tomb. Liam hummed to himself as he stirred, his small hands covered in flour. I let him make a mess. It was the kind of mess that brings back life. When the pancakes were done, he placed 3 on a plate, one for Mommy, one for Grandma, one for himself. "We'll save hers," he said seriously, covering it with foil. I nodded, fighting back tears. Later that morning, I called the hospital to check on Emily. The nurse said she was awake, that she'd asked about Liam. "Can I talk to her?" I asked. A pause, then Emily's voice came through, faint but steady. "Mom?" "Hi, sweetheart," I said. "Guess what? Liam made pancakes for you." I could hear her laugh softly on the other end, the first real laugh in days. "Tell him I love him." When I hung up, I turned to Liam. "Mommy says she loves you." He grinned, his eyes lighting up. "I told you she's getting better." I hugged him tight, breathing in the scent of soap and syrup. In that moment, I realized that even in the darkest times, children have this strange power to remind us of the things worth fighting for. That afternoon, Liam played in the backyard while I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee. Mrs. Franklin came over through the gate, holding a small pot of daisies. "For Emily," she said. "And for you. You look like you could use some color around here." I smiled faintly. "Thank you, Ruth." She looked out at Liam, chasing butterflies. "That boy," she said softly, "he's got light in him. Don't let that man dim it." Her words sank deep into me. That night, when I tucked Liam into bed again, I made a silent vow. Michael would never touch that child again, not with his hands, not with his anger, not even with his shadow. I know some of you watching might understand that kind of vow. You get to an age where life has already taken enough from you, your health, your strength, your loved ones. But the one thing it can't take is your will to protect what's left. So tell me, if it were your grandchild, if that little boy or girl was the last light left in your world, would you fight for them? Just type yes in the comments. I want to know how many of us still believe love can be stronger than fear. That night, as I turned off the lights and listened to the quiet hum of the refrigerator, I whispered a prayer into the dark. Please, God, keep her safe, keep him innocent. Because sometimes, that's all a mother or a grandmother can do. Pray and promise. The next morning, the house smelled like coffee and pancakes again, but I couldn't taste anything. Liam was at the table, coloring quietly while sunlight spilled across his paper. The drawing was of a house with 3 people just like before, but this time he had drawn a big black cloud over it. I stared at it for a long moment before folding it carefully and tucking it into my apron pocket. There was no use pretending anymore. Love alone couldn't fix what had been broken. I rinsed my cup, grabbed my car keys, and whispered to myself, "It's time." I drove to Emily and Michael's house that morning. The key still fit perfectly into the lock, though my hand shook as I turned it. The place felt different, empty, cold, as though joy had been scraped off the walls. The scent of Michael's cologne still lingered in the hallway, sharp and artificial, like a lie that wouldn't fade. In the living room, everything looked untouched. The couch, the books, even the coffee mug he always left half full, it was all there. But it felt staged, like a picture of a life that never really existed. I went upstairs to their bedroom. Emily's side of the closet was half empty, the rest still filled with Michael's pressed shirts, all neatly aligned like soldiers. I stood there for a moment, my throat tightening. Then, something on the dresser caught my eye, an envelope, half tucked under a pile of bills. It was a hotel receipt. Room 306. A date from 2 weeks ago. The signature at the bottom was his. I felt the room spin around me. For a long moment, I just stood there, clutching that slip of paper like it might burn through my skin. 2 weeks ago, when Emily had told me he was away on business, I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the drawer beside me. Inside were more receipts, each from different hotels, spaced out over months. Some charged to his card, some to cash. The pattern was clear. This wasn't a single mistake. It was a way of life. My heart pounded so hard I could barely breathe. I reached for my phone and dialed Thomas, my late husband's old friend. He picked up after the second ring. "Margaret," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "You all right?" "I need your help," I said. "And I need it now." Within an hour, Thomas was sitting across from me in my kitchen, his notepad open, his gray eyes sharp. "Start from the beginning," he said. I told him everything, the bruises, the hospital, the neighbor's sighting, and now the receipts. He didn't interrupt, just kept writing, nodding now and then. When I finished, he exhaled deeply. "I had a feeling about that boy," he muttered. "Always too smooth for his own good." "Can you check something for me?" I asked. "Hotel security cameras. I need to know who he was with." Thomas rubbed his chin. "I can't promise much, but I still know a few folks in town. Give me the details." I slid the receipts toward him. "Start with these." He stood to leave, but before walking out, he put a hand on my shoulder. "You sure you're ready for whatever we find?" "No," I said honestly. "But I need to know." After he left, I sat alone at the table, staring at the steam rising from my untouched coffee. For years, I had believed in giving people second chances. But what happens when you've already given too many? By evening, my phone rang. It was Thomas. "You might want to sit down," he said. My stomach dropped. "What did you find?" "I pulled footage from one of the hotels," he said. "He wasn't alone, Margaret. The woman, young, red hair, about 30, works at the insurance office downtown. Name's Rachel." The name hit me like ice water. "Rachel? Emily's friend?" "Looks that way," he said quietly. "They checked in together 3 times over the last few months, always under different names, but the cameras don't lie." For a moment I couldn't speak. My thoughts tangled between disbelief and fury. Emily had trusted that woman. She had invited her into their home. Thomas hesitated before speaking again. "I'm sorry, Margaret. I know this hurts." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Thank you, Thomas. Keep everything you've found. I'll need it." When I hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring out the window as the sun set behind the trees. The sky was painted in shades of orange and red, beautiful, but cruel. How strange that something so lovely could exist while your world fell apart. I pulled out my notebook, the one I'd started the day before, and wrote down every detail, the dates, the places, the names. My handwriting shook, but my mind was sharp. This wasn't about heartbreak anymore. This was about truth. Later that night, Mrs. Franklin came by to check on me. She brought chicken soup, bless her heart, and sat at the table with me while I told her what Thomas had found. She shook her head. "Men like him don't change, Margaret. They just get better at hiding." "I can't let him get away with this," I said. She gave me a long look. "You won't," she said softly. "But be careful. The truth hurts twice, once when you discover it, and again when you use it." After she left, I went upstairs to check on Liam. He was asleep, his little hand clutching that same stuffed bear. His innocence was the only thing untouched in this mess, and I swore to myself it would stay that way. I sat beside his bed, watching him breathe, and whispered, "You'll never know the kind of man your father really was. Not if I can help it." Then I went back downstairs and opened the drawer where I'd kept the receipts. One by one, I laid them out across the table, a trail of betrayal stretching across months. I thought of Emily, how she would look at him, how she still believed his lies. I couldn't let her go back to that. If you're listening to this story and you've ever had to uncover a truth you didn't want to face, tell me, did you still do it? Just type yes or no in the comments. I want to know if I'm the only one who thinks that sometimes pain is better than blindness. By midnight, Thomas sent one last message. A blurry still frame from the hotel camera, Michael's arm around Rachel's shoulders, both of them laughing as they walked through the lobby. The timestamp read 2 a.m., just 1 week before Emily's collapse. I stared at that image until my vision blurred. The man I had once called son was gone, replaced by a stranger who smiled while destroying the woman I loved most. I folded the photo carefully and placed it inside the notebook. Then I whispered into the empty room, "You'll pay for this, Michael, not out of anger, but because she deserves peace." And as the house fell silent again, I realized something else. This wasn't just Emily's fight anymore. It was mine too. The next morning, Thomas came by just as the sun began to rise. I hadn't slept. My eyes burned from staring at that hotel photo all night. The coffee on the table had gone cold hours ago, untouched. When I opened the door, he didn't say a word at first. He just handed me a brown envelope, thick with papers and a small flash drive. "You'll want to sit down," he said quietly. And that was when I knew whatever was inside that envelope would change everything. My hands trembled as I pulled out the photos. The first one was clear. Michael and Rachel standing in a parking lot behind the Holiday Crest Motel, the cheap kind of place that hides more secrets than walls. He had his arm draped around her shoulder like they were a couple who had nothing to fear. The second photo made my heart stop. It was my car. My old blue sedan, the one I had given them as a wedding gift. They were getting into it together, laughing. I felt my throat tighten. That car had been the last thing my husband and I bought before he died. I'd given it to Emily and Michael thinking it would help them build their new life together. Now, there it was used for betrayal. My husband's memory tainted by their lies. "Where did you get these?" I asked Thomas, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. He sat across from me, folding his cap in his hands. "A friend at the motel's security desk. The timestamp matches the same days from those receipts you gave me." I swallowed hard. "So it's true?" He nodded. "I'm afraid so. And that's not all. He's been meeting her for months. They've got a routine, Margaret. Same car, same motel, every few weeks. And sometimes—" He hesitated, flipping through his notes. "Sometimes they were seen together in town, holding hands, having lunch, not hiding at all." My pulse roared in my ears. The room felt too small, the air too thick. "They didn't even bother to hide?" I asked, my voice cracking between disbelief and fury. "No," he said simply. "Because they knew no one would question them. Everyone thought Rachel was Emily's friend." I stood up so suddenly the chair scraped against the floor. "That snake," I hissed. She sat at my table. She held my grandson. She told me she adored my daughter. I slammed my hand on the table, the sound echoing through the house. "And he used my own car to cheat on her. My car." Thomas stayed silent, letting me rage. He knew better than to interrupt. I paced the kitchen, my heartbeat pounding like war drums. Every memory of Michael now replayed in my mind, but twisted: his polite smile, his fake concern, his gifts at Christmas. Lies, all of them. Every word, every gesture. Lies carefully built to make me trust him, to make Emily blind. I stopped at the window, staring at the backyard where Liam's toy truck lay tipped on its side in the grass. "He betrayed not just Emily," I said softly. "He betrayed this family. He betrayed my husband's memory. He betrayed me." Thomas nodded. "I know, but what are you going to do about it?" That question hung heavy in the air. What was I going to do? I wasn't young anymore. My hands shook when I was angry. My heart couldn't handle this kind of rage for long, but I wasn't helpless either. "I'm going to make sure he pays," I said finally. "Not out of revenge, out of justice." Thomas sighed. "Then you'll need more than photos. You'll need proof of deceit, financial records, fake signatures, anything he's done that crosses the law." I met his eyes. "Then that's what I'll find." After he left, I sat alone again. The silence was deafening. I looked down at the photos spread out across the table. Each one felt like a blade pressed against my chest. I traced my fingers over Michael's face, over the car, over Rachel's smile. There was no guilt there, no shame. They looked happy. And that, more than anything, made me furious. I opened the drawer where I kept my husband's old watch. It had stopped working years ago, but I still wound it sometimes, out of habit. That day, I wound it again, staring at the slow movement of the second hand. "You'd know what to do," I whispered into the empty room. "You'd never let him get away with this." Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the old oak tree in the yard. A storm was coming. I could feel it in my bones. Later that afternoon, I drove to the motel myself. The holiday crest looked even worse in daylight peeling paint, flickering neon sign, cigarette butts scattered along the curb. I parked across the street and watched for a while. A man came out of one of the rooms, adjusting his tie, glancing around nervously. I recognized that walk, that same arrogance Michael carried. I felt something inside me break. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was insulted. He had done all this right under our noses, using the car that carried our family's memories. I gripped the steering wheel, my nails digging into the leather. On the way back, I stopped by the grocery store. I didn't need anything, I just needed to stand among people for a moment, to remind myself the world still had good in it. But even there, betrayal followed me. As I turned down an aisle, I saw Rachel. She was standing by the flower section, picking out lilies. Her hair glowed red under the fluorescent lights, her lips curved into a faint smile. She looked ordinary. That was the worst part. Ordinary, like someone you'd trust. She didn't see me at first. I watched her pay and walk toward the parking lot, my body trembling. When she passed by me, she turned and froze. Our eyes met. Her smile faltered. "Mrs. Thompson," she stammered. "Oh, hi, how's Emily?" I stared at her. Every word I wanted to say caught in my throat. Finally I said, "You should be asking yourself that." Her face drained of color. She mumbled something and hurried out. I stood there, fists clenched, the lilies she had left behind still dripping water onto the floor. When I got home, I sat at the table again, staring at the photos. I felt rage, yes, but also disbelief. How could someone destroy another person's life and walk around smiling as if nothing happened? How could Michael look me in the eyes all those years and call me Mom? That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything, every lie, every silence. For the first time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, real, burning hatred. I got up, opened my notebook, and wrote in big, shaking letters. He used my trust. He used my love. He will not use my silence. Then I closed it and whispered to the empty room, "It's time to fight." That night I sat at the kitchen table long after midnight, the house dark except for the dim glow from the porch light seeping through the curtains. The photos still lay spread before me like a wound that wouldn't close. My hands shook, not from fear this time, but from exhaustion, the kind that sinks into your bones when you've carried pain too long. Somewhere outside, the wind rattled the trees, and I realized I couldn't do this alone. Rage had carried me far, but rage wouldn't protect Emily or little Liam. I needed someone who understood what came next. I needed help, and I knew exactly who to call. The next morning, I drove into the city to meet Sandra Wells, my oldest friend. We'd known each other since high school, back when life was simple, when love still felt safe. Sandra had become a lawyer. one of the few women from our small town who fought her way up without anyone's help. She'd always been fierce, sharp, and loyal. If anyone could help me now, it was her. Her office sat on the corner of Main and Willow, tucked between a bakery and a florist. When I walked in, she was already standing by the window, her silver hair catching the morning light. "Margaret," she said softly, opening her arms. "It's been too long." I fell into her embrace, and for a moment, I felt safe, just two old women holding on to what the years hadn't managed to take. When we sat down, I placed the brown envelope on her desk. She looked at it, then at me. "I assume this isn't a social visit." I shook my head. "No, it's about Emily and Michael." Her eyes narrowed slightly as she opened the envelope. One by one, she pulled out the photos, the receipts, the handwritten notes. With each page, her expression hardened. When she finished, she leaned back in her chair, her face pale but composed. "Dear God," she whispered, "he's been living a double life." "Yes," I said quietly. "And now my daughter is broken, my grandson's confused, and I can't sleep without seeing that man's face." Sandra sighed, rubbing her temples. "You came to me for a reason. What do you want to do?" I hesitated. "I want justice. I want to make sure he can never hurt them again." Her tone softened. "Margaret, listen to me carefully. You can't just think about revenge right now. You have to think about protection, Emily's safety, Liam's future, your home. Because men like Michael don't lose quietly. They take what they can on their way out." Her words hit me like cold water. "You think he'd try to take from us?" Sandra gave a small, sad smile. "You said it yourself. He used your car, your trust, your money. Why would he stop now? He could go after the house, the savings, maybe even try for custody of the boy. If he's clever, and from what you've told me, he's already preparing for that." My heart clenched. "No, he can't have Liam. He can't." "Then we make sure he doesn't." She leaned forward, her tone turning brisk and professional. "First, I'll file for a temporary protection order. That'll keep him from contacting Emily directly. Second, you and Emily need to separate every account, every shared bill. Don't give him access to a single cent." I took a shaky breath. "She's still too weak. I don't want her worrying about paperwork." "Then you do it for her," Sandra said. "We'll set up legal guardianship for now on paper. You'll act on Emily's behalf until she's strong enough. That'll keep Michael from manipulating her while she's recovering." I nodded slowly. For the first time in days, I felt something like direction. Not peace, but purpose. Sandra stood and walked to her bookshelf, pulling down a thick folder. "And there's one more thing," she said, flipping it open. "If Michael has been using your property, your car, your funds, or your assets to facilitate his affair, we can hold him accountable. He's crossed into financial abuse territory." I stared at her. "Is that even possible?" "Possible," she said. "And winnable." I sat back, the tension in my chest easing just a little. "Sandra," I whispered, "what would I do without you?" She smiled gently. "Probably the same thing you've always done, survive. But this time, let me help." We talked for hours. She took notes, made calls, printed forms. When she finally walked me to the door, she squeezed my hand. "I'll have the paperwork ready by tomorrow. You did the right thing coming to me." Outside, the afternoon sun glared against the glass buildings, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a faint glimmer of control. Maybe I couldn't change the past, but I could shape what came next. As I drove back to Ashton Hill, the road stretched ahead like a promise. I thought of Emily's face, still pale in that hospital bed, and of Liam's laughter echoing through the backyard. They deserved better than the shadow of Michael's deceit. When I reached home, the sky had turned gray again, clouds rolling in from the west. I stood at the front door, looking at the framed photos on the wall, my family smiling, frozen in happier times. I touched Emily's face in one of the pictures and whispered, "We'll fix this. We'll make it right." Then I went to my desk and began writing down everything Sandra had told me, each step, each document, each warning. The pen felt heavy in my hand, but the words came steady. Because now, I wasn't just a grieving mother. I was a woman preparing for war. That evening, after leaving Sandra's office, I sat in the car for a long time, listening to the rain drum against the windshield. I could still hear her words, "Men like him don't lose quietly." They echoed in my head like a prophecy. My hands rested on the steering wheel, cold and stiff. I looked out at the traffic lights flickering through the mist, and I knew what I had to do. I couldn't wait for someone else to protect my daughter or my grandson. The law was slow. People were blind. But I had time, and I had will, and that would have to be enough. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The house was quiet, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee and stared at the notebook I had started days ago. On the first page, I wrote 3 names: Emily, Liam, Michael. I circled the first 2 and crossed out the last. That simple act gave me a strange kind of calm. By 7 o'clock, Sandra had already called. "The court will issue the protection order by tomorrow," she said. "But I want you to start separating every account today. Do you have access to their joint bank?" "Yes," I said, flipping through the files. "Emily gave me the information before she was admitted." "Good," Sandra replied. "Transfer her savings into a new account under her name only. Make sure Michael can't touch a cent. I'll handle the paperwork on my end." After the call, I opened my laptop. My fingers shook as I typed, but I managed to create a new account for Emily, one that Michael would never find. I could almost hear my husband's voice in my head, the way he used to talk when he was sorting bills after dinner. "Keep everything clean, Margaret. Keep records." I wrote down every transaction, every receipt, every timestamp. For years, I had thought my meticulous habits were just remnants of loneliness. Now they were my armor. By noon, Mrs. Franklin knocked on my back door again, holding a thermos of soup. "You haven't eaten," she said, stepping inside before I could argue. Her eyes softened when she saw the papers spread across my table. "Still fighting?" "I can't stop now," I said. "He's done too much already." She nodded. "If you need me, I'll talk. I saw him more than once with that woman. You can write my name down if you have to." "I might," I said. "Sandra said eyewitnesses help." Mrs. Franklin set down the soup and reached into her coat pocket. "I have something else too," she said, pulling out a folded piece of paper. "Last week, before all this happened, Michael came by my yard. He didn't see me, but I heard him talking on the phone. Said he was moving money, something about a shared account that Emily didn't know about." I unfolded the note, my stomach twisting. "Are you sure?" She gave me a firm nod. "As sure as I'm standing here." After she left, I made another call to Sandra and told her what Mrs. Franklin had said. "That's good," Sandra told me. "If we can prove financial manipulation, it'll strengthen the case. Keep that note safe." I hung up and walked to the front window. Across the street, the old oak trees swayed in the wind. A storm was brewing again. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my husband's broken watch. The second hand ticked faintly, weak but steady. Maybe that was how I felt too. That afternoon, I went to the hardware store and bought a small security camera. The young clerk asked if I needed help setting it up. "No," I said with a faint smile. "I've learned how to handle things myself." When I got home, I set the camera above the porch light, angled toward the front steps. If Michael came back, I wanted proof. I wasn't going to let him walk into our lives again without consequences. Liam came running in from the backyard, his shoes muddy. "Grandma," he said, "are we planting flowers again?" "Not today, sweetheart," I said softly, kneeling beside him. "Grandma has a little work to do." He frowned. "For Mommy?" "Yes," I whispered, "for Mommy." He smiled, content with that answer, and ran off again. When night fell, I sat on the porch with the lights off, watching the rain glisten on the street. Every sound, the hum of a passing car, the creak of the trees made my heart jump. I wasn't scared, not exactly. It was something else, a deep readiness, the kind you feel before a storm hits. Around 10, my phone buzzed with a message from Sandra. "Be careful. Once he's served the papers, he'll know." I typed back, "Let him know. I'm not hiding anymore." I stared at the glowing screen until it dimmed. The fear that had once kept me quiet was gone now, replaced by something stronger. You know, sometimes the hardest part of growing older isn't the aches or the loneliness, it's realizing that kindness can be used against you. Tell me honestly, if someone betrayed your child and smiled to your face for years, could you forgive them? Just type yes or no in the comments. That night, before going to bed, I checked the camera one last time. The feed flickered, then settled, showing the empty porch bathed in pale light. I took a deep breath and whispered, "Let him come." Because now, I was ready. The next few days passed in uneasy quiet. The protection order had been filed, and Sandra assured me that Michael had been served. Still, I kept checking the porch camera every few hours, expecting to see his car pull into the driveway. The house felt tense, like it was holding its breath. Emily was finally home from the hospital, pale but stronger, moving slowly from room to room. Liam followed her everywhere, clinging to her hand like he was afraid she'd vanish again. I tried to keep things normal, cooking, reading, folding laundry, but every sound outside made me glance toward the door. I knew it was only a matter of time before he came. It happened exactly 1 week later. That morning, the air was heavy, the kind that pressed down on your shoulders. Emily was sitting in the living room, her hair tied back, wearing one of my old sweaters. Liam was playing quietly with his toy cars on the rug. The sunlight through the curtains made soft patterns on the floor. For a moment, it almost felt peaceful until the doorbell rang. Emily froze. The color drained from her face. I looked at her, and we both knew. I walked to the window and pulled the curtain aside. His car was in the driveway, the same black sedan he had bought after trading in the one I'd given them. Michael stepped out, straightening his tie, holding a small bouquet of flowers. The audacity of it made my blood boil. I turned to Emily. "You don't have to see him," I said quietly. But she shook her head. "If I don't, he'll never stop." Her voice was soft, but steady. I hesitated, then nodded. "I'll be right here." When I opened the door, Michael smiled like nothing had happened. "Margaret," he said smoothly, "you look well. I just came to check on Emily. And Liam, of course." "Emily doesn't need you checking on her," I said, blocking the doorway. He tilted his head, that false charm slipping for a second. "I just want to talk. Please." Behind me, I heard Emily's voice. "It's okay, Mom." She was standing near the hallway, her hands trembling slightly. I stepped aside but didn't move far. He entered the house, glancing around as if it still belonged to him. "Looks the same as always," he said lightly. "Home." Emily crossed her arms. "You lost the right to call it that." He sighed dramatically, placing the flowers on the table. "I know you're angry, but we can fix this, Em. We can go to counseling, talk it through. You're throwing away everything we built." "Everything we built?" she repeated, her voice trembling but fierce. "You built lies, Michael. You built bruises and fear." His face hardened. "You're being dramatic. I made mistakes, but so did you. You let your mother interfere in everything. This," he gestured around the room, "this is her influence." That was enough. I stepped forward. "You leave me out of this," I said quietly. He turned to me, smirking. "With all due respect, Margaret, maybe if you hadn't filled her head with your bitterness, she wouldn't be doing this." Something inside me snapped. I straightened my back, meeting his eyes. My bitterness didn't put bruises on her skin. My words didn't send her to the hospital. For a moment, the room went silent, except for the sound of Liam's small car rolling across the floor. Then Michael laughed low, bitter. "You're twisting everything. Emily fell. She said so herself." Emily's voice cracked. "I said that because I was scared." He turned toward her sharply, his tone changing. "Scared of what? Me?" I stepped between them before she could answer. "Yes," I said coldly. "Scared of the man who hit her. Scared of the husband who cheated on her. Scared of the liar standing in my house pretending he's the victim." He blinked, his composure slipping. "You think you're protecting her, but you're ruining this family." I pointed toward the door, my voice steady but sharp. "This family broke the night you raised your hand against my daughter." For a second, I thought he might shout, but instead he laughed again, a cruel sound that made my stomach turn. "You always did hate me, didn't you? You couldn't stand that she chose me." I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. From behind me, Liam's small voice broke the tension. "Mommy, I'm scared." Emily rushed to him, kneeling to hold him close. Michael looked at them, his jaw tightening. "You're turning him against me," he said. "No," Emily whispered. "You did that yourself." He stared for another long moment, his face red with anger, then turned toward the door. "You'll regret this," he said quietly. "Both of you." I followed him out onto the porch. The rain had started again, slow and steady. "If you ever come here again without permission," I said, "I'll call the police, and this time they'll listen." He glared at me. "You think you can scare me, old woman?" I met his stare without flinching. "No," I said softly, "but I can stop you." He hesitated, then turned, walking back to his car. The tires splashed water as he drove away. When I went back inside, Emily was sitting on the couch, holding Liam tightly. Her shoulders shook, but she didn't cry. She just whispered, "It's over, right?" I looked out the window at the empty driveway and said quietly, "No, not yet, but soon." After Michael left that day, the house stayed silent for a long time. The air felt thick, like the echo of his voice was still hanging in the corners. Emily sat curled up on the couch with Liam in her arms, staring at the flowers he had left behind. I picked them up and threw them into the trash without a word. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the sky was still heavy and gray. The peace we'd fought for wasn't real yet, it was only the eye of the storm. I knew he'd come back, not with fists this time, but with lawyers and lies. The world has a way of letting men like him twist the truth. That's why I needed to strike first. The next morning, I was already at Sandra's office by 8 o'clock sharp. She was there waiting for me, her hair pinned neatly, glasses perched low on her nose. The sight of her calm presence steadied me. "I heard he showed up," she said as I sat down. "He did," I replied, tried to act like nothing happened, said we ruined the family. Sandra sighed, sliding a folder across the desk toward me. Typical. They always play the victim when they lose control. Inside the folder were pages-typed statements, bank records, and photos. At the top of one document, in bold print, were the words, "Petition for Protective Custody and Civil Complaint." My heart pounded as I read through it. "You're really doing this?" I whispered. She nodded. "We're not just filing for the restraining order anymore. We're going after him for everything: emotional abuse, infidelity, and financial deception." I looked up from the papers, my throat tight. "Will it hold up in court?" Sandra leaned back, her expression hard. "Oh, it will. We've got more than enough. Between Mrs. Franklin's testimony, Thomas's investigation, and the bank transfers we found, he's cornered." She reached for another document. Mrs. Franklin already signed her witness statement. She wrote down everything she saw, every meeting with that red-haired woman, every argument she overheard. Thomas confirmed the dates matched the hotel receipts. I could feel tears prick my eyes, but they weren't from sadness. It was relief, sharp and raw. For weeks, I had been holding my breath, and now I could finally exhale. "So what happens now?" "We file this morning," Sandra said. "Once the court reviews the evidence, they'll issue an interim order. He'll be legally barred from coming near Emily or Liam. And since the house was purchased using your late husband's estate, Michael has no legal claim to it. The judge can order him to vacate immediately." I closed my eyes, the weight of those words sinking in. For the first time there was hope, not fragile, trembling hope, but something real. When we left her office, the rain had started again, soft but steady. Sandra carried the folder under her arm like a sword. "I'll handle the courthouse," she said. "You go home, take care of Emily, and make sure she doesn't answer his calls." I nodded. "She won't." By afternoon, the phone began ringing. Unknown numbers. One after another. I knew it was him. I unplugged the landline and turned my cell to silent. Emily was upstairs resting, and Liam was drawing by the window, humming to himself. I stood by the doorway, watching him color a picture of a house under a bright Sunday. He looked peaceful, unaware of the war being fought in his name. Around 5, Sandra called back. "It's done," she said. "The judge signed the order. He's to vacate the marital home within 72 hours and have no contact with Emily or Liam." For a long moment, I couldn't speak. Then I whispered, "Thank you." "There's more," she said. "If he violates the order, he'll be arrested, and the court will begin the civil hearing next month." When I hung up, I stood in the middle of the kitchen, staring at the quiet house. It felt different, lighter somehow, like the walls themselves had exhaled. For weeks, I'd been waiting for someone else to fix things, but the truth was, it had taken every single person, Sandra, Mrs. Franklin, Thomas, to bring justice back into our lives. That evening, I walked across the yard to Mrs. Franklin's porch. She was watering her roses in the drizzle, her old straw hat drooping with rain. When she saw me, she smiled. "Well?" "It's done," I said simply. "He's out." She let out a long breath. "Good. Maybe now that girl can sleep again." "She will," I said, though I wasn't sure if I was convincing her or myself. "Thank you, Ruth, for standing up when no one else would." She waved a hand. "Don't thank me. I just told the truth. You're the one who had the courage to use it." We stood there in silence for a moment, the rain falling softly between us. I looked at her garden bright flowers pushing through wet soil, stubborn and alive. That's what survival looked like. When I returned home, Emily was sitting on the couch with a blanket over her lap. She looked up as I entered. "Is it over?" she asked quietly. "Not yet," I said. "But we're winning." She nodded slowly, a faint smile crossing her face for the first time in months. "Thank you, Mom." I reached out and took her hand. "You don't have to thank me. This is what mothers do." Later that night, after everyone was asleep, I sat by the window again. The rain had stopped, and the moon broke through the clouds, silver and still. I opened my notebook and wrote a single line across the page. "Justice doesn't always arrive quickly, but it does arrive." The following week passed in uneasy calm. Emily was sleeping better, Liam was laughing again, and for the first time, the house didn't feel like a battlefield. Still, I couldn't relax. Peace like that never lasts, not when the truth is still crawling in the dark. Sandra had warned me that men like Michael rarely surrender. They just wait for another chance to strike. So when my phone rang one evening and an unfamiliar woman's voice said, "Mrs. Thompson, please don't hang up. My name is Rachel." The room seemed to tilt. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Her name alone made my blood run cold. "What do you want?" I asked. Her voice shook on the other end. "I'm not calling to cause trouble. I want to make things right." I laughed bitterly. "You've done enough already." "I know," she said quickly. "That's why I'm calling. Michael told me illegal things. He forged Emily's signature. He transferred her savings into his own account using her name. I didn't realize what he'd done until I saw the court order. I swear I didn't." The air in the room felt heavy. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because he's blaming me," she whispered. "He said if he goes down, he'll drag me with him. I can't go to jail for something I didn't do. Please, Mrs. Thompson. I'll testify. I'll tell Sandra everything. I need protection." I stood there gripping the phone, my mind spinning. Could I trust her? Or was this just another trap? Her voice, though, trembled with fear, not the kind you fake, but the kind that comes when you realize you've hit the end of the line. "Meet me tomorrow," I said finally, 9 o'clock, Sandra's office. The next morning, Rachel arrived looking nothing like the woman in those photographs. Her makeup was gone, her eyes swollen from crying. She sat across from Sandra, twisting a tissue in her hands. "He made me believe he loved me," she said. "But all he ever wanted was money." Sandra pressed record on a small device. "Start from the beginning." Rachel told us everything: how Michael had stolen Emily's identification papers, how he had practiced her signature until he could copy it perfectly, how he used Rachel's account to funnel the funds. Each detail tightened the knot of fury in my chest. When she finished, Sandra leaned back, expression grave. "This is it," she said quietly. "The last piece." I looked at Rachel, who was trembling. "You'll testify?" "Yes," she whispered. "I just want to be done with him." As she left, I stood by the window watching her walk to her car, small against the gray sky. For a fleeting moment, I almost pitied her. Almost. Sometimes the universe balances its scales in the strangest ways. The woman who helped break my daughter's heart had just handed me the proof that would destroy the man who caused it. Tell me, if someone who once hurt your family came back begging for forgiveness, would you believe them? Just type yes or no below. After Rachel's confession, Sandra worked through the night preparing the case file. Her office lights burned long after the rest of the city went dark. I sat beside her, too restless to sleep, listening to the quiet hum of the printer and the soft rustle of papers. The evidence we had built for weeks now stood solid. Photos, documents, signatures, witness statements, each one a nail in the coffin of Michael's lies. By dawn, when the first light crept through the blinds, Sandra closed the last folder and looked at me. "We're ready," she said. "Court's in 2 days." I nodded, but my stomach churned. Ready or not, this was it. The morning of the hearing, the courthouse stood gray and solemn against a cloudy sky. I parked the car carefully and helped Emily step out. She looked pale but steady, her hair tied back neatly, her hands clutching a folder of documents Sandra had given her. Liam held my other hand tightly. He didn't fully understand what was happening, only that we were going somewhere important, to make Mommy safe. Inside, the courtroom smelled faintly of old wood and coffee. The benches creaked as people shifted in their seats. The sound of shuffling papers, low voices, and the echo of footsteps filled the air. Sandra met us near the front, her briefcase clasped under one arm. "He's representing himself," she said quietly. "His lawyer withdrew last night." "Why?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. Sandra gave a faint smile. "Because liars don't pay their bills." When Michael entered, a hush swept through the room. He looked thinner, more tired, his confident swagger gone, but his eyes still carried that same cold arrogance. He scanned the room until his gaze landed on Emily, then on me. I didn't look away. The judge, a tall man with silver hair and sharp eyes, took his seat. Court is now in session. His voice was firm, cutting through the murmurs. Case number 3462, Thompson versus Thompson. Sandra began by laying out the timeline years of marriage, the affair, the physical and emotional abuse, the financial deception. Each point was clear, deliberate, undeniable. Then she called Rachel to the stand. Rachel entered hesitantly, her hands clasped in front of her. She looked at Michael briefly, then down at her feet. Her voice shook as she spoke, but she didn't falter. She told the court everything she had told us, how he had forged Emily's signature, how he had used her bank account to hide stolen money, how he had threatened her when she tried to leave. The courtroom was silent except for her voice and the steady scratching of the clerk's pen. When Sandra asked if she had any proof, Rachel reached into her purse and produced a small flash drive. "These are recordings," she said. "He didn't know I kept them." Sandra plugged the drive into a laptop connected to the courtroom screen. The judge nodded for her to proceed. The first recording began with Michael's voice, smooth but venomous. "She'll never find out. I've got it covered. Her mother thinks I'm perfect. That old woman would believe anything." My stomach turned. Across the room, Emily covered her face with her hands. The next clip was worse, his voice raised and cruel. "If she leaves, I'll take Liam. I'll make sure she has nothing." When the recording ended, the silence in the courtroom felt like a held breath. The judge's expression didn't change, but his eyes darkened. Michael tried to recover, standing abruptly. "Those recordings were taken without my consent," he snapped. "They're illegal." The judge's tone was calm but cutting. "They are admissible in cases of domestic and financial abuse. Sit down, Mr. Thompson." For the first time I saw fear flicker across Michael's face. Sandra called her final witness Thomas. He testified about the investigations, the receipts, the surveillance footage. Each detail closed another door, leaving Michael no room to twist free. When she finished, Sandra rested her hands on the table and said, "Your Honor, my client seeks not revenge, but protection. She seeks safety for herself and her child, and closure for what this man has stolen years of peace, security, and dignity." When it was Michael's turn to speak, his words were hollow. He rambled about misunderstandings, about how Emily was fragile, how I had poisoned her mind. The judge listened, unmoved. Then he leaned forward, his tone final. "I've heard enough." The courtroom held still. "Mr. Thompson," the judge said, "you stand accused of fraud, coercion, and domestic abuse. The evidence presented leaves no doubt. This court grants full custody of the minor child, Liam Thompson, to his mother, Emily Thompson. The property and financial assets previously shared are hereby awarded to the petitioner." Michael's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The judge continued, "Furthermore, any attempt to contact or approach the victims will be treated as a criminal violation of this order." Sandra placed a gentle hand on Emily's shoulder. Emily's eyes filled with tears, but this time, they were not from pain. As the gavel struck the bench, I felt a weight lift from my chest, a weight I'd carried for years. It wasn't joy, not exactly, but something stronger. Justice. Michael was led out of the courtroom in silence, his arrogance gone, replaced by the hollow look of a man who finally realized his power had limits. I turned to Emily, squeezing her hand. "It's over," I whispered. She nodded, tears shining in her eyes. "We did it, Mom." Outside the courthouse, the rain had stopped. The sun broke through the clouds, bathing the steps in gold. For the first time in months, I could breathe again. That night, after the verdict, the house felt unfamiliar in its quiet. No shouting, no footsteps, no fear, just stillness. Emily slept soundly for the first time in months, and I sat by the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. The storm outside had ended, but the one inside us would take longer to fade. I didn't know what the next chapter would hold, only that, for the first time in years, we were free to find out. 3 months passed before I realized how quiet the house had become, not the kind of silence that feels heavy, but the kind that hums softly, like a song you finally learned to live with. Emily had started working again, part-time at the community library. Liam went back to school, running through the front door every afternoon with grass stains on his knees and a new story to tell. Some mornings I still woke before dawn. I'd make coffee, open the curtains, and watch the light spill over the porch. The same porch where, months ago, Emily had collapsed in my arms at 3 a.m. Now that space held laughter again. Toys, chalk drawings, life. One Sunday, Emily joined me with 2 mugs of coffee. "You ever think we'll forget all of it?" she asked quietly. I shook my head. "No, but maybe that's not the point. Maybe we just learn to live beside the pain until it grows small enough to hold." She smiled, tired but real. "You always make things sound simpler than they are." "Maybe that's age," I said, and we both laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from people who've already seen the worst and are grateful for whatever comes next. Later that afternoon, while Emily was folding laundry and Liam was playing in the yard, I walked down to the mailbox. The sky was clear, the air sweet with the smell of cut grass. Inside the box sat a single envelope, my name written in a familiar hand. I froze. The handwriting was unmistakable, steady, slanted, and patient. My husband's. I turned the envelope over. There was no return address, only a faint postmark from a small town 2 states away. My hands shook as I tore it open. Inside was a letter, yellowed at the edges, dated 12 years earlier, shortly after his heart surgery, months before he passed. It must have been lost among old estate files and found by someone at the lawyer's office when Sandra requested our records. The words blurred through my tears. "If you're reading this, Margaret, it means I'm gone. Promise me something. Take care of our girl, no matter how hard it gets. She'll love deeply, sometimes too deeply, just like you. When life hurts her, remind her she's not alone. And remind yourself, too, that love doesn't end when people do. It just changes shape." At the bottom was his signature, strong, certain. I stood there in the sunlight, letter trembling in my hands, feeling like he was beside me again. It wasn't a miracle, not the kind you read in books, but it was enough. A reminder that even in endings, there are small beginnings waiting quietly. That evening, I sat on the porch with the letter in my lap. Emily came out, curious. "What's that?" "Something your father left us," I said softly. "Something I think he wanted you to know." She took it, read silently, and when she finished, she leaned her head on my shoulder. "He knew, didn't he? About all of it? About how life would test us?" I smiled faintly. "He always did have good timing." Liam ran up then, clutching a small paper airplane. "Grandma, look, it can fly." He tossed it into the air, and it soared higher than I expected, catching the evening breeze before landing gently on the porch railing. He clapped his hands, grinning from ear to ear. Emily picked it up and handed it to me. On the wing, written in crayon, were 3 words. "We are safe." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just looked at him, at Emily, at the home that had once been filled with fear and now held only peace. The next morning, I placed my husband's letter inside a small wooden box with old photos and Liam's airplane. Then I closed it, whispering, "We kept our promise." Sometimes, justice isn't the loud slam of a gavel or the sound of someone walking away defeated. Sometimes, it's as quiet as a child laughing in the yard, or a daughter breathing without fear, or a mother sitting alone with her coffee, knowing she did right by her family. I've learned that healing doesn't come all at once. It comes in pieces, one honest word, one small step, one brave decision at a time. And maybe that's the real ending to this story. Not revenge, not punishment, but peace. If you've listened this far, thank you for staying with me through every word, every tear, every breath of this story. If you feel something in your heart, if you've ever fought for love, or for justice, or simply to be heard, then I hope you'll stand with me. If you feel this story, please press like. If it didn't speak to you, leave the number 9 in the comments so I know to tell it better next time. And don't forget to subscribe, because there are still so many stories left to tell, stories that might just touch the quiet corners of your heart, the way this one touched mine.